Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a program that talks about breeding of terrorism and its impact on South Asian nations. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan draws flag at UN Virtual Counter-Terrorism Week. Elderly women killed in cross-border shelling by Pakistani troops at LOC. Taliban ramp up attacks in Afghanistan ahead of Intra-Afghan negotiations. And POK activist calls out Pakistan for shedding crocodile tears on Kashmiris, urges PM to look into his own conscience. Time and again, Pakistan has been exposed at various global forums for being a terror breeder and for providing safe haven to terrorists. The United Nations Counter-Terrorism Center launched a virtual exposition on 7th July, wherein Islamabad once again faced grave humiliation, since not only India condemned the country for being a terror sponsor, in addition to it, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, in his opening statements, also highlighted the threat posed by terror groups like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State and its affiliates whose close links have often been found in Pakistan and who are waiting to leverage the ongoing pandemic situation. A report.
In the UN Virtual Counter-Terrorism Week held from 6th to 10th July, diplomats from several countries and associated groups discussed the threat posed by terrorism to world peace and harmony. At the launch of the virtual conference, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres talked about the strategic and practical challenges of countering terrorism in a global pandemic environment. Antonio, in his statement, urged the countries to closely monitor evolving terrorist threats and trends to tackle the spread of terrorist narratives through pandemic-sensitive holistic approaches. Taking an indirect jibe at Pakistan, the UN chief specifically mentioned the terrorist groups active in South Asia, saying that such groups are looking forward to take inadequate advantage of the coronavirus pandemic situation. Terror groups such as the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and their regional affiliates must not be allowed to exploit the increasing fissures and fragilities due to the psychosocial, economic, and political stresses laid bare by the COVID-19 pandemic, said Antonio Guterres at the launch of week-long UN Counter-Terrorism virtual conference.
They have been rebutted a large number of times earlier in United Nations, and they have been rebutted once again this time. And they have been told in no uncertain terms, which the whole world knows, that they are the largest epicenter of terrorism.
Taking clue from UN chief's remarks on spreading network of terrorism and its impact during the COVID-19 outbreak, India, in its statement during the webinar, emphasized upon Pakistan's unrelenting support to terrorism amidst the ongoing pandemic. Mahavir Singhvi, head of Indian delegation, said that while the world is coming together to battle the pandemic, it is unfortunate that Pakistan, a state which sponsors cross-border terrorism, continues to use every opportunity to peddle false narratives and make baseless, malicious and egregious allegations against India and interfere in its internal affairs.
India has rightly highlighted Pakistan's duplicitous behavior in the virtual meeting of the UN Office of Counter-Terrorism. Now, Pakistan continues to use terrorism as part of its state policy and considers the terrorist groups which it operates from its soil to be used against India as its strategic assets. It is important for the world not just to put pressure on Pakistan, but to ratchet up that pressure and impose sanctions on that country to force it to change its ways.
India, during the conference, called on the international community to ask Pakistan to take sustained, verifiable and irreversible actions against terror outfits operating on the territory under its control. Listing out the Islamabad's role in terror attack on the Indian mission in Kabul, Mumbai terror attack of 2008, Pathankot attack of 2016, Uri and Pulwama, the Indian delegate also hit out at Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan for his recent comments in the National Parliament terming 9/11 mastermind Osama bin Laden a martyr.
एक हुआ जी उसामा बिन लादेन को इन्होंने अमेरिकन ने आके अब्टाबाद में मार दिया, शहीद कर दिया.
Imran's statement on Osama bin Laden was a chilling reminder of the patronage that the international terrorists receive in Pakistan.
The fact that Taliban actually continues to operate from Pakistan, the fact that all kinds of terrorists they continue to operate from Pakistan and continue to train the terrorism. I mean, what more does one need to say really? Everybody knows, and the continuing on the grey list in the FATF is a clear acknowledgement that Pakistan continues to support terrorism. So unless they bend their own ways, it's going to be difficult to deal with them really in that matter.
In the past, Pakistan's PM publicly acknowledged the presence of up to 40,000 terrorists in his country. Adding to the country's embarrassment, a recent report of the Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team of the UN Security Council reported that around 6,500 Pakistani terrorists belonging to LET and JEM are operating in Afghanistan, noting that it is high time for countries to take a holistic approach towards tackling the growing menace of terrorism. Representatives from various international groups and countries opined that a global understanding of the counter-terrorism efforts around the world was needed. The UN Chief Secretary General stressed on the need for the international community to keep up the momentum in the fight against terrorism by investing in national, regional and global counter-terrorism capabilities, especially for countries most in need of assistance.
Despite facing repeated global condemnation for its terrorist sponsoring policy, Pakistan does not stop its ill-motivated activities at line of control and in the hinterland of Jammu and Kashmir. Baffled by the killing of top terror commanders in Kashmir, Pakistani troops have once again intensified cross-border shelling at the LOC to facilitate infiltration of newly trained terrorists from its launch pads. The effective counter-terrorism operations of Indian security forces in the last few weeks have led to the complete disruption of top terror network in the valley. A report. In a bid to create unrest in the Kashmir valley, Pakistan is consistently making efforts to infiltrate terrorists into the Indian territory. Recently, Indian Army foiled a major infiltration bid of Pakistan-backed terrorists in India's northern Rajouri district of Jammu and Kashmir. The infiltration attempt was supported by the Pakistani troops who launched unprovoked cross-border shelling along Mendhar and Balakot sectors of Poonch and Rajouri region, killing an elderly woman and injuring another civilian. The deceased was identified as 60-year-old Reshma B.
तो जब इनको इसको हमने एग्जामिन किया तो इसको जो है लेफ्ट लेग पे कि इसको 5x5 सेंटीमीटर लेसरेटेड वोंड है विद फ्रेगमेंट्स ऑफ बोन इसको दिख रहे हैं वहाँ से बोथ बोन इसकी फ्रैक्चर है और इसको राइट थाई पे भी एक वोंड है अबाउट 3x3 सेंटीमीटर एक्टिव ब्लीड कर रहे थे लेकिन उन्होंने वहाँ से प्राइमरी इसका ये ड्रेसिंग में रख के भेजा था लेकिन पेशेंट ने ब्लीड काफ़ी ज़्यादा किया हुआ था पल्स बीपी जो था रिकॉर्डेबल नहीं था और बाकी इसको जो अबडामन में मल्टीपल इसको है स्प्लिंटर इंजरी है.
Terrorism has always been used as proxy by Pakistan to wage a war against India, and it has intensified its operation ever since New Delhi revoked the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, bifurcating it into two union territories. Pakistan has been hiring mercenaries and sending them across border to spread unrest. However, vigilant Indian forces have thwarted almost all of its designs in past few weeks. A significant number of infiltrators have been eliminated, while many others have been apprehended. In a latest counter-terrorism operation, Indian security forces gunned down a terrorist in an encounter in Pulwama district of Jammu and Kashmir territory. Indian Army, Paramilitary Central Reserve Police Force and Jammu and Kashmir Police had laid a cordon in the district's Gasu area on specific inputs. During the search operation, terrorists and security forces exchanged fire, leading to the killing of the terrorist in retaliatory firing by the forces. The security forces have reportedly neutralized around 138 terrorists, including top commanders like Haider of Lashkar-e-Taiba and Riaz Naiku of Hizbul Mujahideen during various encounters in the valley in the past 6 months.
The action from the other side, especially the terrorist elements, are still active, and they got killed. When they get killed, it means that they were not expecting Indian forces to be alert. The intelligence worked very well. The coordination is very good, and that is how you are seeing the last 10-15 days the number of people, the terrorists which have been killed in a record number of time. That just shows that at the moment terrorists are now in a state of disarray. Their command control is now getting weak. Their handlers cannot handle them well. They are under pressure in the POK area, and very soon they know India will start launching pressure on them in the POK area. And of course, as our leaders have already decided that POK will have to be taken.
The sharp increase in attempts of infiltration of terrorists from Pakistan and explosive attacks indicate that Pakistan has never been and will never be ready to establish peace and accord. Frustrated by its failures in unleashing mayhem in Kashmir, Islamabad has been pursuing new terror plots to attack the forces. But vigilant Indian security forces, equipped with appropriate intelligence system, have been lucratively foiling all of them. After months-long stalemate of intra-Afghan negotiations, the Afghan government and the Taliban finally agreed to initiate the long-awaited peace talks. However, the chances of peace returning to war-torn nation are still hanging on a thread, as the Islamist group has not put a halt to its offensive against Afghan security forces. The violence has ramped up since the agreement, and discord over the release of Taliban prisoners has hampered progress on formal talks, even as the United States is trying hard to broker a peace deal between the Taliban and the Afghan government, aimed at ending the decades-long war. A report.
Taliban has not put a halt to an all-out offensive on the battleground. Dozens of Afghan security forces and civilians are being killed on a daily basis. In a recent wave of violence in Afghanistan, at least 47 security personnel and 17 civilians were killed and several others were wounded. The deadliest of the all was a Taliban suicide bomb attack in the Afghan province of Kandahar, where a Taliban suicide bomber detonated an explosive-laden military vehicle on the approach to the provincial governor's residence and police headquarters. Earlier, Taliban attacks on an Afghan police convoy in southern Zabul province and the eastern province of Nangarhar also killed several police officers. As per the sources, Afghan military repelled these attacks on army checkpoints in Nangarhar province that killed at least 20 Taliban militants, including their leader. The Taliban and Afghan forces have been trading blame over the recent surge in the attacks across the country, even as the United States is trying hard to broker the direct peace talks between the two warring sides, posing a direct threat to intra-Afghan negotiations.
दुकान के लगे कोरोना को चोन साबि द्रस چې درس ودورش لانور بس خلک کو تخدید را درامټری پرتی زخمیانو مړي پراته او خلک راغل مړیم چې کلو زخمیانو لازم په دکانه د منځته.
The Taliban's recent attacks have taken a heavy toll on Afghan forces. According to the National Security Council of Afghanistan, The Taliban group carried out 422 attacks in 32 provinces during the past month, killing 291 security personnel and wounding 550 others. Civilians too are bearing the brunt of this deadly conflict, as the Security Council has accused the Taliban of carrying out 44 attacks and killing or injuring 24 civilians every day in the country since earlier this year. Consequently, Afghanistan government has termed the Taliban's commitment to reduce violence as meaningless and their actions inconsistent with their rhetoric on peace.
The peace deal notwithstanding, the Taliban have been carrying out relentless attacks against the Afghan forces as well as the civilians. From 1st of March to 15th of April, they have carried out 4,500 attacks, in which over 900 Afghan forces people were killed and very many civilians were killed, and number of wounded were in tens of thousands. Under the circumstances, obviously there cannot be an effective peace deal. As far as the stance of the three parties is concerned, America is very keen that the deal will go through because Trump sees it as a ploy to win the November election. However, as far as Taliban is concerned, they want taking maximum concessions from the Afghan government and the Americans without conceding anything in return. And as far as the Afghan government is concerned, they do not trust the Taliban and the Americans, and they do not wish to give in easily because it will eventually mean rule over Afghanistan by Taliban.
The violence has forever been a key obstacle to any negotiations between the Taliban and the Kabul government, which were envisaged by the US Taliban deal signed in the late February to end 19 years of war in Afghanistan. Standing firm against the violence by the Taliban, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani once again warned that bloodshed by the Taliban is threatening the country's peace process. Accusing the insurgent group for unleashing a wave of violence in the country, Ghani said, if the Taliban continues to fight, the Afghan peace process will face serious challenges. These accusations come as the insurgent group and the Afghan government inch closer to potential peace negotiations, posing an immediate threat to upcoming intra-Afghan talks.
Ashraf Ghani's statement that the violence by Taliban is a major roadblock as far as peace process is concerned is very timely. In the week ending 22 June, the Taliban have killed 291 Afghan security forces, injured 522 and killed 42 civilians. With this sort of a violence, it is unlikely that the peace process can reach the conclusion. It's a very, very clear warning that as far as this juncture is concerned, Afghanistan is in a very, very delicate state.
The deal also called for the Afghan government to free 5,000 Taliban prisoners in exchange for the Taliban releasing 1,000 government and military personnel they hold captive. So far, the Afghan government has released more than 4,000 imprisoned insurgents, while the Taliban have freed 669 Afghan security personnel. But the dispute over hundreds of Taliban prisoners has prevented the launch of intra-Afghan talks that were to have begun in March this year. Afghan authorities said they will not release around 600 Taliban captives as they are too dangerous despite planned peace talks that hinge on the prisoner exchange. Despite the disagreement, the Afghan government peace negotiating team is fully prepared to enter into talks with the insurgent group. However, the Taliban has said that the group will not endorse intra-Afghan talks unless the Afghan government releases its 5,000 prisoners from the jails.
So far, they have released only about 3,000 prisoners. The balance, which the Taliban is insisting that before any further negotiations, the balance 2,000 be released, is something that is holding the talks. In the meantime, Taliban attacks are continuing. Under these circumstances, I don't see much of a future as far as peace prospects in Afghanistan is concerned. Certainly not till the American elections. Once the next American government comes into being, I'm very certain the outlook towards Taliban and Afghanistan will change, because presently the American interest, the interests of Afghanistan have been compromised, and only the personal interest of Trump is being met.
The US-Taliban peace deal paves the way for withdrawing of all foreign forces from Afghanistan by the end of May 2021. However, that complete withdrawal is condition-based. That includes a Taliban guarantee that Afghan soil will not be used as a launch pad against the US and its allies, the launch of intra-Afghan negotiations, and a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire in Afghanistan. The US has already reduced its troop presence to 8,600, fulfilling its obligation as part of the February deal. But the continuous surge of violence by Taliban is suggestive of the unchanged stance and strategy of the insurgent group, despite all the talks.
State-sponsored human rights violations in Pakistan are no more a secret. Whether it is a Kashmiri, a Baloch, a Sindhi, or even an Ahmadiyya, his life is perennially on the edge. But Pakistani Prime Minister chooses to lecture and school other nations, surprisingly those who are run by a robust democratic framework. Recently, he took to Twitter to vent his frustration of failure at India, a neighbor his entire country has been insecure of for 7 decades. As expected, there were no takers of his shallow social media rhetoric. In fact, he has been mocked and shown a mirror by Kashmiri activists who are suffering in exile due to his own government's atrocities. Tweets with the sole objective of spewing hate against Indian armed forces and Prime Minister Narendra Modi are being bombarded upon 11.8 million of Imran's Twitter followers. Having become a regular exercise, these tweets claim Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory to be under the illegal occupation of India and accuse the Indian government of violating the 4th Geneva Convention by committing war crimes and of several other atrocities committed on minorities. Busting the disinformation social media campaign of Pakistan's Prime Minister, the exiled POK activist Amjad Ayub Mirza asserted that it was Pakistan which had occupied the land of Kashmir. By narrating the dreadful accounts of history, Mirza demanded that Pakistani war crimes must be brought in front of the International Court of Justice.
अक्टूबर 1947 को पाकिस्तान ने 50,000 कबायली लश्करियों को साथ मिलाकर 5 एंट्री पॉइंट से जम्मू कश्मीर की आज़ाद रियासत पर अनप्रोवोक्ड अटैक किया था। पाकिस्तान का हमला क्यों गैर कानूनी था? इसलिए कि 8 जुलाई सन 1947 को वेस्टमिनिस्टर में ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट ने इंडिया इंडिपेंडेंस एक्ट पास किया था। उस इंडिपेंडेंस एक्ट के तहत ये कहा गया था कि जो 560 से ज़ायद प्रिंसली स्टेट्स हैं हिंदुस्तान में, उनको ये इजाज़त है कि वो ये फ़ैसला करें कि उन्होंने पाकिस्तान के साथ जाना है या भारत के साथ जाना है या इंडिपेंडेंट रहना है। तो इसमें जो रियासत जम्मू कश्मीर के महाराजा थे, महाराजा हरी सिंह, उन्होंने मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना के साथ एक स्टैंड स्टिल एग्रीमेंट किया था, यानी जूं का तूं मुआहदा, जिसे मुआहदा कायमा भी कहते हैं, यानी कि हम पाकिस्तान में फ़िलहाल शामिल होना नहीं चाहते। इसको कायद-ए-आज़म मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना जिसको बोलते हैं, उसने तस्लीम किया था कि ठीक है, हम इस मुआहदा कायमा को तस्लीम करते हैं, लेकिन इसके बावजूद एक अनप्रोवोक्ड अटैक किया गया।
Even after committing such heinous crimes against the population of Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan still keeps the audacity to say that it is worried about Kashmiris. Moreover, even after being aware of this fact, that it was due to Pakistan's action that Maharaja Hari Singh of Jammu and Kashmir decided to join Indian Union and signed an instrument of accession on October 26, 1947 that gave control of Jammu and Kashmir to the government of India, Pakistan has kept on accusing India of illegal occupation. Even today, while on one side it keeps on shedding its crocodile tears, showing fake concerns towards the people of Jammu and Kashmir, on the other, it kills thousands of Kashmiris every year by initiating cross-border firing to achieve its own selfish agendas. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We will be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Shreya Savijay signing off on the behalf of entire production team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.